Happy Kids TV.
The Holy Tales.
Today's story is called Jesus Dies on the Cross. I hope all of you children will enjoy listening to the story.
Go on with the story, Holy. Let's not waste any more time.
It was about 9 o'clock in the morning when Jesus was led to Golgotha by the soldiers for his crucifixion. His cross was in between two thieves who were also being crucified that day. Before putting Jesus on the cross, the soldiers offered him wine, which was mixed with myrrh and would numb his senses. But Jesus refused it. The soldiers took off his clothes and threw a dice to see which one of them would get to keep his robe. A sign which said, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews," was hung at the top of his cross. People who came to watch him being killed shouted,
"He saved other people. Let him save himself."
"Go ahead, King of the Jews. Save yourself."
The soldiers continued to make fun of him and kept on offering him drinks of sour wine. One of the thieves on his side said,
"You say you are the Messiah? Then prove it by saving yourself and us too."
But the other thief on his other side said,
"Don't you fear God, even when you're dying? You and I deserve to die for the bad things we have done. But this man has done nothing wrong."
Then he turned to Jesus and said,
"Jesus, remember me when you come to rule."
Jesus said,
"You will be with me this day in heaven."
Jesus' mother was there in the crowd with other women and watching all this happening. Jesus saw her standing near one of his disciples whom he loved very much. He looked at his mother and said,
"Woman, he is your son."
Then he turned to his disciple and said,
"From now, she is your mother."
By now, it was almost noontime. Even then, the sky grew dark, and the entire land was in complete darkness until 3 in the afternoon. Jesus looked up in the sky and called out,
"My God, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Then he shouted,
"Father, into your hands I put my spirit,"
and died. Suddenly, the thick veil that hung in the temple was torn apart from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, and graves broke open. When the captain of the guard saw all this happening, he said,
Truly, this man was God's son.
All of Jesus' friends who were watching the crucifixion went home with hearts filled with sadness. The religious leaders did not want the bodies hanging on the crosses the next day because it was the Sabbath. So they asked Pilate to hurry up with the deaths by breaking their legs. The soldiers broke the legs of the 2 criminals, but seeing that Jesus was already dead, they did not break his legs. However, one of the soldiers stuck his spear into Jesus' side, and blood and water flowed out. A man named Joseph from Arimathea asked Pilate if he could bury Jesus' body in a brand new tomb that no one had been buried in yet. He was given permission to take Jesus' body down, while other people brought ointments and perfumes to put on the body, which was the Jewish custom before burial. They wrapped Jesus in special strips of cloth for burial and laid him in the tomb that was like a large cave. A heavy stone was rolled in front of the opening of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and the other woman named Mary stood nearby and saw all of this happen. So, did you all like the story?
I did.
Me too. I like the story too. But I did feel a little sad when Jesus died.
I understand.
To watch more videos, please subscribe.
The Holy Tales.
I hope you all are ready to hear a new story from the Bible, just like Tubby, Gumbo, and Freckles. Early morning on that following Sunday, Mary Magdalene and few other women came to the tomb where Jesus was buried. They hadn't been able to prepare Jesus' body for burial because of the Sabbath, and now that it was over, they could put their offerings of oils and perfumes on him. When they left town to go to Jesus' tomb, the women wondered about how they would move the heavy stone from the opening of the tomb. But when they reached the tomb, they were amazed. The stone had already been moved. The women rushed into the tomb, only to find that Jesus' body was nowhere around. They were confused. Suddenly, two men appeared who were dressed in bright white robes. The women were terrified to see them, but the two men, who were angels, said,
Why are you looking inside a tomb for someone who is alive? The one you are looking for isn't here. He has risen from the dead. Do you not remember that he told you he would be crucified and come back to life on the third day?
The women then remembered Jesus saying that in one of his teachings. Mary Magdalene was standing outside the tomb, trying to understand what might have happened. She started crying when she saw a man standing nearby. The man asked her,
Why are you crying?
Mary said, Sir, please tell where have they taken his body? I will go and get him.
Mary.
The man gently said. That is when she realized that it was no one else but Jesus. The women, along with Mary Magdalene, rushed back to town to tell Jesus' disciples that he was alive. The disciples ran to the tomb as fast as they could to see if it was true. Peter ran into the tomb and found the strips of cloth that were used to wrap around Jesus' body were lying neatly folded. He was nowhere there in the tomb. He was alive!
That was the best story ever. I am so happy. Thank you, Holy, for telling me this particular story. I loved it.
Me too. It was indeed a nice story.
Ha 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 ha! I'm glad you kids enjoyed the story.
To watch more videos, please subscribe.
The Holy Tales.
Well, today's story is called The Transfiguration.
The what?
The Transfiguration. You will know the meaning of the word once I am done telling you the story.
Great! Then let's not waste any more time. Go on with the story, Holy.
As days passed, Jesus knew that his ministry on earth was winding down and his life on earth was coming to a close. However, his disciples did not understand that though. One day, Jesus took Peter, James, and John on top of a high mountain. No one else was there with them, just the four of them. Suddenly, James, Peter and John saw Jesus' appearance change completely. They were amazed. His face shone as bright as the sun. They could hardly look at his face with all the brightness. His clothes changed too. All of a sudden, Jesus was wearing robes which were sparkling and brilliant white. Peter, John, and James had never seen anything like this before. After a while, suddenly, James, John, and Peter saw two more men with Jesus. The disciples recognized them as Moses and Elijah. The two old prophets were talking to Jesus about how he was going to finish God's plan by dying in Jerusalem. Peter, overwhelmed with glory, he raced up to Jesus and said,
"This is wonderful! It's amazing! If you tell me, I will build 3 shrines right here to honor this experience. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah."
As Peter was speaking, a cloud came from heaven and settled over them. Peter, James, and John were terrified. They could not see anything through the cloud. They suddenly heard a voice coming from heaven.
This is my beloved Son, and I am very happy with him. Listen closely to him.
The disciples fell to the ground and covered their eyes. When the cloud gradually lifted, Peter, James, and John saw that Moses and Elijah were gone too. Jesus came over to them and asked them to get up.
Don't be afraid.
He said,
Don't tell anyone what you have seen here until I have risen from the dead.
The disciples did not understand what Jesus was trying to say, but they all had one question in their minds. Peter asked,
Why do the religious leaders insist that Elijah has to return before the Messiah comes?
Jesus answered his question. He said,
Elijah is coming first to set everything straight. But the truth is that he already came, but everyone failed to recognize him. They mistreated him, and soon they will mistreat the Son of God too.
So now do you understand the meaning of Transfiguration? It means complete change in appearance and into a more spiritual state.
Yes, got it.
That was the story for today. Hope you all liked it. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.
To watch more videos, please subscribe.
Plants and trees. On the 4th day, God created the sun to shine in the day, the moon and stars to come out at night. One day, Moses went to Mount Horeb with his sheep. There, God appeared to him as a flame of fire in a bush. Since there was no room anywhere else, they decided to spend the night in a stable. Here, Mary had her baby, Jesus. She wrapped him in a blanket and put him to sleep.
He's got the whole